Okay, good evening. Am I on here? It's good to see everyone tonight. Before I introduce our speaker, I have a brief announcement. Miss Jennifer Hargis suffered from a stroke, and she is in a hospital room now. I do not know about whether or not she can take visits or not. That may be something you want to contact the office about. However, she does certainly need your prayers. And also, if you look at the church Facebook site, Lacey Haynes is organizing a meal train to help with her family, and she has numerous family members, as you know, with all the children they take care of. And so check that out, and maybe perhaps you can help her out with that meal train. We're very thankful tonight to continue our Summer Faith series and our study through the book of Hebrews and Jesus' superiority, and also the things that the Hebrew writer compares Jesus to. And tonight we're thankful to have Matthew Hyatt with us. He serves as the pulpit minister at the Burns Church of Christ. He is the Dixon Police Department chaplain and volunteers also in the Dixon County Jail Chaplaincy and the CareNet Pregnancy Center. He enjoys time with his family, motorcycling, hammock camping, disc golf, and trail running. He is a graduate of Freed Hardeman and Harding, currently pursuing his doctorate in ministry from Knox Theological Seminary. His wife is Leslie Tinsvold, formerly Leslie Tinsvold of Independence, Missouri, and he has two children, Caleb, who is 11, and also Katie, who is 9, and he is also the proud favorite brother-in-law of our own Sandy Neal. We're glad to have you with us here tonight, Matthew.
Well, friends, it's good to be with you tonight. Thank you for the invitation. When I was walking in from the parking lot, I saw a bunch of the kids getting ready to go to the youth program, and they said, "Do you get to come with us?" And I said, "No, I don't." They said, "I'm so sorry." So I just want you to know your reputation precedes you. I'm not entirely sure what to make of that. When you get to go to different congregations in the summer, you'll never know exactly what to expect. You put a picture of me on your PowerPoint slide, which is not something I generally recommend. I think it's cruel and unhuman punishment. But I was at a church of Christ that will not be named. It's called Hilldale in Clarksville. And a couple of years ago, they ran that picture, and the picture was on the bulletin. The picture was on the PowerPoint, their screen. Don't get screen envy, but theirs was pretty big. It was there, and I'm sitting about where you were, and the lady next to me says, "I know you from somewhere." And I'm kind of a smart aleck by nature, and I'm thinking, they know you're the guest speaker, don't be mean, okay? Well, I don't think I know you, ma'am, I'm sorry. Well, you just have a familiar face. And again, my picture's literally behind her as we're talking, and I'm trying to think of any nice way to say to her, "Well, there it is, genius." And she goes, "You know what? I know who you look like." And I'm thinking, the guest speaker tonight? I don't know what the answer to this is. She goes, "You look like Ted Bundy." And I thought, well, it's going to be that kind of night. So, now, she was super sweet, and I really liked that lady. But you just never know what you're going to get. And you never know what you're going to get when you get asked to talk about the book of Hebrews. Evidently, Tim hates me because I think that Hebrews is the hardest preaching in the New Testament. It is a weird book. And when you spend time in a chapter of Hebrews, if you have 30 minutes, you're going to end up needing to spend 25 minutes explaining Old Testament stuff, because Hebrews assumes that you're in on the joke about everything it talks about. And frankly, most of us aren't great Old Testament scholars. There's so much stuff there. I get lost. You know, when I was in Bible school, I could tell you the tribes, and I could tell you the judges, and I could tell you all that stuff. But ever since Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, things have just gone terribly downhill for me. So I hope you'll indulge me while we do some Old Testament stuff to kind of work our way through this story about Jesus is better than Melchizedek. I had a friend in the car I was talking to on the way here, and he offered me $20 if I tried to mispronounce Melchizedek a different way every time I said his name tonight. But he didn't offer me 50, so that's not what we're going to do. This quote, you've seen it before, haven't you? Comparison's the thief of joy. You've seen that, I'm sure. And the idea is, right, we can make ourselves miserable by looking at other people's lives. There's always somebody who has more stuff than you, who has a nicer car than you, a better beard than you, looks more like Ted Bundy than you. Whatever the comparison is, it has a way of just kind of robbing things from us. And I think that's true. But I think there's a sense in which this quote isn't true, because there's a lot of comparisons that are frankly pretty helpful for us. We we do this whole report card thing. Now, don't get me started about how crazy school testing is sometimes, but there's a sense in which it's useful to know, did you pass chemistry or did you fail chemistry? My wife teaches chemistry at Austin Peay State University, and she likes to say that she saves lives because of the people who don't go to med school because of the grades they get in her chemistry class. Thank God every time that one of these is not your doctor. Sometimes comparing ourselves to something can be a pretty helpful thing. Maybe you're trying to buy something and you do that comparison chart. You know, this model has these features, this model has this price, whatever it is. And so comparison can be kind of helpful. I've told your youth group before, though, that I have one particular comparison that I want to bring into the world. When I get elected dictator for life, one of the things that I want to bring change to the world is I want to make one significant adjustment to the Olympics. When you watch the Olympics on TV and you see Michael Phelps swim, you know that he's fast because the commentators tell you that he's fast. But you don't have any sense of just how fast Michael Phelps is because all the guys in the pool are really, really fast. You know what I mean? It's like watching NASCAR on TV. You don't get any sense. There's just cars going in a circle all day long. You don't really get a sense that these things are going 175 miles per hour. So when I become dictator, here's what we're going to do. In every Olympic sport, we're going to add a couple extra lanes. And what we're going to do is we're going to have the Olympic athlete, and then we're going to have a college athlete, and then we're going to have a high school athlete, and we're going to have a random middle-aged accountant. And the reason we're going to have the random middle-aged accountant, Justin, is so that we can show you just how fast Usain Bolt really is. You don't get it until you see just how different he is from you and from me. In fact, there was something I saw on YouTube once. You're going to need to Google this at some point. There's this guy named Eliud. I would pronounce his last name, but I don't have a prayer of doing it. He is one of the fastest marathon runners in the world. He has actually broken 2 hours to run 26.2 miles, which, come to find out, is pretty fast. That's 13 miles an hour. Which doesn't sound all that fast when you're driving in Nashville traffic, but when you're running, it's really, really stinking fast. Now that sound, that number, 13 miles an hour, that doesn't sound impressive. It doesn't mean a whole lot to most of us. That's 4 minutes, 35 seconds per mile. That starts to mean something to some. Some of you can't make it to the bathroom and back in 4 minutes and 35 seconds. He's already finished a mile in that amount of time, and then he does it 25.2 more times after that. So there was a group at the Chicago Marathon a couple years ago who wanted people to get it. So what they did was they bought a 20-foot treadmill, and they set it to that speed. By the way, most treadmills at the YMCA will only go to 12 miles per hour because most of the time you hurt yourself if you try to go any faster than that. There's some real good YouTube videos about that, but I can't recommend those in good conscience. So they set up this treadmill, and it's a long one. It's a 20-foot treadmill, and they invited people to see how long they could run Eliud's pace. Now, again, I won't ruin the ending for you, but this is just one of the screenshots because this is how almost all of them end. You can make it for a little bit, but most of us can't do that real long. And by the way, it's great. They get shot off the back. It is so much fun. I never said I was a good person, okay? I'm just the guy that's speaking tonight. Here's what I want to tell you. This treadmill is a comparison designed to show what's better, what's worse. The book of Hebrews is this treadmill. Do you follow me? The book of Hebrews, I think, is designed exactly like this treadmill. So you put some things on it, and they run a little while, and they can't keep up. What can't they keep up with? You know the answer already, church. They can't keep up with Jesus because Jesus is better. Better than what? Better than anything you fill that blank with. You know, we're funny when we use that word better. What's the little idiom we use? That's better than sliced bread. That's not all that exciting. I've had sliced bread my whole life. And if it doesn't come sliced, I have this cool invention. It's called a knife, and you can slice it. In fact, we're real uptown in Dixon County. I even own an electric knife, and sometimes lets me use it. It's pretty cool. Better than what? So that's the idea in all of Hebrews. And last week you talked about Jesus in Moses. Hebrews is the treadmill that shows you that Moses can't keep up with Jesus. If you remember nothing else tonight, Hebrews is the treadmill. Everything else falls down. Can you get that far? Okay, now you can go to sleep. The rest is for the people who want extra heaven points tonight. No matter what you compare Jesus to, Jesus is better. He is the incomparable Christ, I think. And so every chapter of Hebrews is basically some sort of comparison. And I know this chart is too small for you to read, but there's a website. It's Visual Unit, VISUAL, unit, UNIT, .me. It's a weird website address. And they put this chart together, and it walks you through the book of Hebrews and shows you all of the things in each chapter that Jesus is better than. Jesus is better than the angels. And by the way, the angels are really cool. They're really powerful. They are God's messengers. They outlive us. There's a story in the Old Testament where one angel kills, 185,000 Assyrians, if I remember correctly. I don't want to go toe-to-toe with that guy. There's a treadmill comparison, right? Jesus is better than the temple. Jesus is better than the law of Moses. All of these things. And smack dab in the middle of this description, this list, is our text tonight. Jesus is better than Melchizedek. Now, here's the problem. When I say Jesus is better than Melchizedek, you say, huh? Huh? Who's that? What's that? Why do I care? In fact, truly, the problem you and I have with the entire book of Hebrews is you and I have been in and around Christianity long enough that we're not actually impressed with anything on this chart. Jesus is better than Moses? Well, yeah, he's dead and gone. Of course he's better than Moses. But you don't realize how good Moses was, how special Moses was. Jesus is better than the temple? Well, the temple's been destroyed for 2,000 years. Why would I be so impressed by that? And so one of the things we have to do is do some real work to dig into these texts to appreciate just what it means that Jesus is better. Okay, that's a lot of intro. Are you still awake? You doing okay? Check your neighbor, make sure they haven't died. It's really awkward when people die in church and no one notices. Okay, Philip has a sermon about that. You should ask him about it. So we're in Hebrews chapter 5 tonight. That's where the comparison to Melchizedek starts. Hebrews is a weird book. It calls itself a word of encouragement. Maybe it's a sermon. Maybe it's a letter. Maybe it's a letter that has a sermon in it. I don't know. People argue about all this stuff all the time. But one of the things that Hebrews does that is both frustrating and helpful, it's what I'm doing right now. Do you ever know somebody who starts to tell you a story, and then in the middle of the story, it reminds them of a story, and they start to tell you another story? Does that ever happen? I call it spider webbing because you kind of get a little distracted. And then the problem is before they finish that story, they start another story. And now you're 3 stories deep. And you know that if you try to end the conversation, it's going to take another half hour before you find your way back to the beginning. The fancy term for this is Hebrews uses a lot of these parentheticals. You know what a parenthesis is, right? It's a section of text that you could kind of throw parentheses around it. And then you've got to come right back to where you're, but there's a whole chapter in between them. Stay with me. This is nerd stuff. Hebrews 5 starts talking about how Jesus is our great high priest. And Hebrews 5:11 starts this parenthetical. It's a parenthetical, by the way, of having deaf ears, of not listening. But once this side topic finishes, Hebrews 6:20 picks up exactly where 5:10 left off. Wow, this is scintillating stuff, isn't it? Aren't you glad you came to church tonight? I'm talking to you about literary structures in Hebrews. You're thinking, man, that's what I really needed tonight. It's been a rough week. I nearly murdered the kids. Please, Matthew, tell me about parentheticals. Okay, stay with me. It's all right. Let me show you this. Hebrews 5, 9 to 10, Hebrews 6, 19 to 20. Do you notice anything similar about these 2 verses, boys and girls? Okay. If not, I've given it to you in giant, bold colors to try to help you. Notice how they say basically the exact same things. There is eternal salvation, a high priest in the order of Melchizedek, high priest forever, eternal order of Melchizedek. You see how these 2 verses say the same things? That's one of the clues of this weird structure of Hebrews. So why, again, am I telling you this? I'm telling you this to prove I got my money's worth at Freed-Hardeman. No, I'm telling you this because I want you to see what the author of Hebrews is doing. The whole book is kind of structured to make this point. So you can almost start reading chapter 5, 9, and 10, and then skip to 6:20 to hear the continuation of the argument. That's not to say that the stuff in the middle isn't important, but it's a side trail. And it's a side trail you need to understand to appreciate what's happening right here. Whew. You're still with me? We're still okay. We can do this, I think. Jesus, these texts tell us, has become a priest How long? What does the Bible say there? Forever. According to what? According to the order of Melchizedek. Whatever the point of chapter 7 turns out to be, it's important enough that it stays in the preacher's mind. He has to get back to it. The text tells us Jesus is better because Jesus is a priest and Jesus is a Melchizedekian priest. Again, aren't you glad that you came to church tonight? You were thinking, man, I really need someone to tell me about Melchizedekian priesthoods. Huh? Stick with this. Most of us don't know enough about priests to know the difference between the Pope and Melchizedek. And frankly, where we are and where we worship, the idea of priests are not an image that is positive for most of us. That's not how we see the church organized. We believe in the priesthood of all believers, but when you hear the word priest, you picture one of two things. Either a Bible flannelgraph that Philip put together with an Old Testament dude with some weird jewelry and a dress on, or a guy in Italy somewhere with weird jewelry and a dress on, and neither of those seem particularly useful to you. So saying that Jesus is better than a priest is not a whole lot better for a lot of us than saying Jesus is better than a used car salesman. Why is Hebrews spending 2 or 3 chapters to tell us this? There must be something there. Here's the backstory. When we talk about priests in the Bible, we're talking about Aaronic Levites, not to be confused with moronic Levites. That's a lesson for a different day. Levi was not, in fact, the first maker of blue jeans. He is one of the 12 sons of Jacob. Do you remember your vacation Bible school? And his tribe became the priestly tribe. Within his tribe, Aaron's descendants became the priests. The Levites took care of all of the related duties. Do you know this story? In number 16, there's a guy named Korah, K-O-R-A-H, one of the Levites, and he led a rebellion against Moses and Aaron. And here's what happens. This is Numbers 16, verse 3. He says, "You have gone too far." This is where Korah's rebellion begins. He says, "You have gone too far, for all in the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then, Moses, do you put yourself in front of everybody? Why do you lift yourself up? Why do you think you're so special, Moses?" Do you see what Korah is saying here? Now, the text doesn't tell us exactly what set Korah off in this place. The previous chapter is mostly full of laws. There's a story about a Sabbath breaker getting executed. Maybe Korah didn't like that, but I don't know. Whatever brought it up, Korah and company see nothing special about Moses and Aaron. Why do they get to be in charge? But Korah forgot the story about why Moses and Aaron were in charge. Do you know that story? Yeah, I didn't think so, because I didn't either. So dig in. How did Moses and Aaron end up in the positions they ended up in? Moses did not raise his hand and say, "God, sir, I would like to be in charge of Israel." Do you remember the story? I was in North Carolina a while back, and there was a political sign for a guy who was running for county commission named Forrest, and the sign said, "Run, Forrest, run." I really kind of liked that one. Moses did not have signs printed that say, "Run, Moses, run." He didn't have hats. He didn't have campaigns. Do you remember how Moses became in charge? Well, when he was a kid, his mom saved his life. There was that. Then he got kind of hot and angry about some injustice, and he kind of killed a guy. It's an unusual career path to the presidency, I think. And then he ends up living off in a foreign land for a really long time. You remember these particular stories? You remember Moses ends up in front of a burning bush. I remember that one. And God said, "Hey, Moses, I've got a job for you." And do you remember what Moses said? He said, "Yes, Lord, I would love to do that." No? Is that not what he said? The text was filled with Moses making excuses. I don't want to do it. Who should I say sent me? What's your name? What are they going to say? Why would they listen to me? I don't talk good. He said all of these things. Do you remember that story? And at the end of that story, after the burning bush and all of these other things that God did to prepare Moses for the right time and the right place, at the end of that story, Moses overfills with all of these excuses, and the last thing Moses says to God in Exodus 4 is, "I want you to send somebody else." Do you remember who God raised up? He said, "Let me talk to you about your brother, Aaron." So how did Moses get the job? Do you remember? I just told you. Moses got the job because God said, "Hey, Moses, this is your job." And Moses said, "I don't want it." And God said, you're doing it anyway. How did Aaron get the job? He had the misfortune of being Moses' brother, as best I can tell when I read the Bible. So that makes this story of Korah's rebellion extra weird. Korah says, what made you so special that you get to be in charge? And Moses' answer would be, I didn't want this job. I didn't set out for this job. God called me for this job. Oh yeah, and there's this real funny line about how Moses is the meekest man ever to live. He was not vying for this. Korah forgot this. That's not the only thing this Korah dude forgot. Korah and his buddies forgot that they begged Moses to talk to God on their behalf. They were scared to talk to God. God's holiness is so real and so terrifying that all Israel literally said, we will die if we talk to God. You go as the go-between. So that's what Moses did. Why was Moses the priest? Moses was the priest not because Moses wanted to be the priest. He was priest because God wanted him to be the priest. He was the priest because the people wanted him to be the priest. The only person who didn't want Moses to be the priest, as best I could tell, was Moses. Remember that as you read this story. This is how the Levites, and specifically Aaron and Moses, got this job of leading Israel. Okay, I thought this was about Hebrews. Yeah, me too. Stay with me. This story gets confirmed again in Exodus 32. Right after God gave the 10 Commandments. You remember that story? Moses came down from the mountain and finds a golden calf, which his brother Aaron helped build. It's an awkward part of the story. By the way, this is an interesting scene. Talk about a family feud moment. Moses is on the mountain with God, and his brother's in the valley with the devil. That's what's happening in this particular scene. I imagine there were some really awkward conversations about that, and if I were Moses, I would have never let Aaron forget about it the rest of his life. But in the aftermath of that golden calf story, Moses called out to the people. This is Exodus 32:26. And he said to the camp of Israel, who is on the Lord's side, come to me. And who gathered around him? Do you see it in your Bible? It's on the screen behind me. The sons of Levi. That's how the Levites get pulled further into this story. The Levites answered the call. This is Moses and Aaron's brothers and cousins. This is their tribe. Now this part gets tough too. God told these Levites to put on a sword and to kill these evildoers and avenge God's holiness, and so they did. And this is a text that ends with the slaughter of 3,000 men. And here's what Moses says in Exodus 32:29. Today, you Levites have been ordained for the service of the Lord, each one at the cost of his son and his brother, so that he might bestow a blessing upon you this day. How many of you had this as a memory verse? Nobody? We don't have a lot of hymns based on this song, on this verse, do we? This is a bloody text. This is a hard text. But this is the text that tells you how the Levites got their job, and these are the texts that tell you how the priests became priests. You never thought that one of the qualifications for being a priest was being good with a sword. Side note, that should make you a little bit more scared of Craig than you already are, but that's a sermon for another day. Korah was one of these Levites too. He and Moses were first cousins. Unlike back in Dixon County, their family trees have branches. They weren't all wreaths. He's one of the special ones in this community. So when he rebelled against Moses, was he jealous? I don't know. Did he think Moses was some sort of radical? Did he think he was some jihadi or something like that? I don't know. I don't know exactly. But when Korah asks Moses, why do you think you're so special? There's two really clear answers in the story. Answer one, God called Moses. Answer two, these people answered God's call. That's why Moses and the Levites are so special. Korah says, Moses, you've gone too far. You think you're so special. And Moses shoots back, number 16, verse 8. No, God's going to sort this out. You have gone too far. He says, God has really given you a great honor. He has called you to serve the tabernacle. Are you trying to force his hand to do more? Now, I'm not going to fill in the rest of the details for you. Go read Numbers 16 sometime, but here's the short version. The next thing God does is offer to kill them all. Wow, that's a communion talk for you, by the way. God offers to kill all of the people, and Moses, doing the priest thing, stands up to God and says, don't kill them. The nations will talk bad about you. Wow. God tells Moses, tell everybody to get away from Korah and his buddies, and here's what happens next. As soon as he finished speaking all these words, the ground underneath them split apart. The earth opened its mouth, it swallowed them up, and those who belonged to Korah and his family were swallowed alive into Sheol, the grave, and they perished from the midst. Oh yeah, one more thing, verse 35. And fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense. Aren't you happy you came to church tonight? I asked Craig if he would come and light the fire at this point, but he said that wasn't appropriate. And then I asked if somebody could play Johnny Cash's Burning Ring of Fire, and they also said that was inappropriate. But here's this text. This is the backstory of these people. Now, God wants to make sure the point is clearly made. So in verse 38, the censers, the little incense things these guys were holding when they got roasted, were hammered into plates as a covering for the altar, as a sign for the people. And here's your sign, to be a reminder to the people of Israel, so that no outsider who is not of the descendants of Aaron should draw near to burn incense before the Lord, lest he end up like the guys who used to be holding these things. This was a warning. What kind of warning? I have a friend, I really like what he did. A couple of years ago, he had a wasp nest built in the front porch of his house, and he started killing them one by one, which is the Lord's work, I want to be clear. But he's a little weird, so that's why I like him. He started taking the little wasps and putting them on toothpicks and leaving them on his front porch as warnings to the rest of them. I thought that was genius. I think they might be able to diagnose that someday, but it was a warning. I don't know if that worked. God did that sort of thing in this text. Here's your warning. Now, what was the warning? Did you see the warning again? Number 1640. The warning was lest anyone who is not in this family ever came to offer this incense before God. Who is allowed to offer incense before God? This family only. The Levites, the people of Aaron. Now, again, this is not something that frequently concerns us in Mount Juliet today. In the New Covenant, we don't have this "what family are you part of" thing. I suspect that Craig does not know what tribe he's part of. I suspect that Philip can't spell tribe. I suspect that most of us couldn't name all 12 tribes if we really had to. And do Ephraim and Manasseh count? I'm not real sure. But this is a really big idea in Judaism. The only people who are allowed to be the mediators for God are this one family. Matthew, I thought you were talking about Hebrews tonight. I promise I am eventually. This is big. There's another confirmation in Numbers 17, but I've just got to skip that because I'm going to run out of time. I'm on page 7, and we're not to Hebrews yet. The argument of Hebrews 7. Do you remember that verse I showed you that was in chapter 5, chapter 6? Same one. Jesus is a better priest because he is a priest forever according to Melchizedek. He's in the order of Melchizedek. So the idea that Jesus is priest is a big idea, and it's a hard idea. It's a big idea because it means that Jesus stands between us and God, and that's really cool. Hebrews has already told us that we don't have any other priests like that because Jesus is a priest who can sympathize with our weakness. He has been tempted in every way just as we are. I don't know exactly how that works, but it tells me that Jesus experienced the whole range of human emotion. That means that one time Jesus went to a restaurant and ordered Dr. Pepper, and they brought him a Diet Dr. Pepper, and he thought about turning over the tables. He experienced every temptation just like we have. He is one of us, and he stands before God, yet he's perfect, right? But Jesus as priest has one big problem. What family do you have to be of to be a priest in Israel? Okay, remember the jeans you're wearing? Levite. Now again, this is what makes this lesson so hard. You and I don't care about that. But the Jews cared very much because every time they went to church, they saw a reminder of the guys that God killed for breaking these laws. So when Jesus shows up as prophet and priest and king, one of the easiest ways that his enemies could disqualify him is say, he's not a Levite. He's a fraud. He doesn't have any right to do this. This man is just like Korah, and he's trying to lead us away from God. Can you imagine the Pharisees saying something like that? Of course they would. They're trying to discredit him. By the way, the devil knows that one of the best ways to attack faith is to do anything that minimizes or discredits Jesus. And he's smart, right? He's sneaky. He doesn't walk up to you and say, you really shouldn't believe in Jesus. He didn't exist. No. That's not what the devil does. The devil does things that are far more subtle. He tries to make you think that Jesus doesn't get you. He tries to get you to think that Jesus is just a good moral teacher, like Gandhi or Mr. Rogers or, who's the guy with the afro who does all the paintings? Bob Ross, there you go. He tries to give us the idea that he's just a good guy. He tries to discredit the ministry in some way. And so it would have been a really popular thing if you didn't like Jesus because you were jealous of him or felt threatened by him or you were trying to hold on to your own power like the Pharisees and Sadducees did. It would have been a really easy thing to say. He can't be who he says he is. Because if he's a priest and he's not a Levite, then he must be a false priest and he deserves to die. That's the argument they would have made, I think. So what would you say to that? Well, Matthew, no one's ever asked me what to say to that question. I know. That's what makes Hebrews tough. We live in a different time with different questions and different issues, but the root stuff's still the same. People are still trying to discredit Jesus to this day. So what would you say? So Hebrews says, let me tell you what kind of priest Jesus was. He was a better priest. And the Pharisees would say, well, you could say that all you want, but what makes it true? Why is this right? Well, the author of Hebrews says, he's not a priest like Levi. He wasn't a priest like Aaron. He was a priest like Melchizedek. And when I say a priest like Melchizedek, we all look like each other and say, bless you, you need to clear your throat, Melchizedek, But in the ancient world, when somebody said a priest like Melchizedek, they went, So let me help you go let me see if I can get you there. Jesus came from the tribe of Judah. Boom, disqualified. How does Jesus do this Melchizedek thing? It would have been so sticky for him to navigate. And again, we don't relate because if Jesus is raised from the dead, I don't really care who tribe he was, but the Jews cared very, 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 very much. Instead of being a priest like Aaron and the Levites, he's a Melchizedekian priest. Here's what this means. Melchizedek's name shows up in two other places in your entire Bible. One is Psalm 110, which is quoted here. The other is Genesis 14, where Abraham rescues his people and then bows down before this guy named Melchizedek and offers him a tenth of everything he has. So just right there, we have almost no information. But almost no information is not the same as no information. Here's what we know right off the bat. We know that Melchizedek is greater than Abraham. Hebrews 7:7-8 reminds us that you don't randomly give 10% of your money as a tribute to someone unless you think that person is worthy of tribute. Abraham thought Melchizedek was greater than him. That's a big deal in Judaism. That's what happens in Genesis 14. And if there's someone greater on earth than Abraham, there's someone greater than Levi and someone greater than Moses too. That's a huge deal. Second idea, Melchizedek is older than Aaron. I can bring you through the family tree. Aaron's dad was Amminadab, his dad was Gershon, his dad was Levi, his dad was Jacob, his dad was Isaac. You following me? His dad was Abraham. Abraham's great-great-great-grandpa was, Aaron's great-great-great-grandpa was Abraham. Hebrews 7:9-10 is kind of funny. It says that Levi himself, who receives tithes, was paid tithes through Abraham, for he was, now this is the funny line, was still in the loins of his ancestor. You and I would say he wasn't even a twinkle in his mother's eye yet. He wasn't even an idea yet. Melchizedek must be better. If I were in the youth group class, I would say he's the OG priest. He was actually around before the priests were around. So here's what Hebrews is doing. It says, in God's way, you know his law, and his law is good and holy and beautiful and all of those things. Read Galatians sometimes, read Romans sometimes. But God's law is not all there is of God. God existed prior to the giving of the covenant. God had plans prior to the giving of the covenant. And so God had a covenantal arrangement with Israel that all of the priests must come through Levi. But God existed before Levi, didn't he? Jesus existed before Levi, didn't he? And to make that point, he brings up this character named Melchizedek. This tells us that Jesus is better than any priest you'd ever have. Now, I'm getting close to done, I promise. What this text does for us is spells out 7 ways that Jesus is better than any priest that could ever exist. And all 7 of these are incredibly real and relevant for us today. Jesus is a better priest because, one, his priesthood is older. We've just covered that. Jesus has always been. There is nothing in your life that you will experience that Jesus doesn't know about. You will never surprise him. Remember that when you pray. If you've got something really weird you need to talk to God about, don't be surprised that Jesus already knows about it. That's a pretty cool part of your prayer life. He has always been God's plan. He was not some last-ditch idea. Jesus is the culmination of human history. Second thing, his priesthood is not only older, it is greater. Abraham is the father of the covenant. Melchizedek was around before Father Abraham was ever thought about in VBS songs. Just another reminder that God always has a plan, even when you and I can't see it. Third idea, his priesthood is not limited biologically or ethnically or racially. There's this line in Hebrews 7 verse 3 that says, like Melchizedek, he's without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. In all sorts of weird arguments burst out of this verse. But what I think is happening is he's trying to tell you that this thing is not limited to one person in one place. God has always been interested in all of the people. You and I sing that each week, red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. The Levites were only the priest for the Jews, but there's an argument to be made that Melchizedek was open to all. Isn't that one of the cool things about Jesus? He's the one who is open to all people, all places, all tribes. If you really want to go down the nerd rabbit trail, by the way, there's some stuff in the Apocrypha, the extra biblical book of 2nd Enoch, talking about Melchizedek. The Essenes and Qumran thought some weird stuff. I don't know what to make of any of it, but what I think the text is trying to tell you is that Jesus is the sort of priest who never gets old. He was never too young to know what he was doing. He was never too old to know what he was doing. He's perfect at all times. Fourth idea, his priesthood didn't require a sacrifice to purify because he was the sacrifice. The fifth thing, his priesthood didn't have an ending. Sixth thing, his priesthood offers perfection. These are all things that Jesus does, and no one or nothing else can. Okay. Melchizedek tells you something about what Jesus is. You and I struggle with this. In fact, only 17 of you are asleep right now. I'm so very proud of you. 2 of you look like you might be dead. You might check the pulse on your neighbor. It's okay. I just dumped a fire hose of Old Testament stuff on you, Korah and Levi and all of those stories. But the reason the author of Hebrews told you all of these stories is because he was trying to paint for you this 3D picture of Jesus. We get in our heads this church version of Jesus where he just sort of floats and says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." No. Jesus is the one who stands between you and God. Jesus is the one who, when God gets mad at his people, says, "Hey, Father, don't kill them. He's with me." Jesus is the one who says, no matter what happens, I want to give them an opportunity. Jesus is the one who advocates for you personally before the Father. Read 1 John. It's all over that book. Jesus is the priest who never begins and never ends. He is always with you. I want you to know this about Jesus. He is standing at the right hand of the throne of God, and he's looking at you, and he's saying, that one's with me, if you're one of his followers, if you've put him on. What does it mean that Jesus is better than Melchizedek? You remember that treadmill? You remember those guys falling off that treadmill? You've really got to Google that. Look that up on YouTube when you go home. You just have to play some of those videos on mute. I'll go ahead and warn you. They don't all say praise God when they hit the back. You remember those videos? Showed you things failing in the comparison. Melchizedek is a reminder to us of all of the things we compare to Jesus that don't come short. Can I just tell you a little secret? This is a really good church. You knew that already. You wouldn't be here on a Wednesday night if you didn't know that. But this church isn't as good as Jesus is. So when you get frustrated with this church, because every church has a reason to get frustrated. If your church doesn't have a reason, you are the reason. Congratulations. When you get frustrated with this church, I want you to remember Jesus is better than this church. When you get frustrated at our country, you look at election season and you watch your friends and neighbors fight with each other about which senile pervert to vote for. I want you to know something. Jesus is better. So don't get sucked into all that stuff, because Jesus is good and he's never failed. When you watch someone that you love lose their health and approach the end of their days and lose some of their ability, I want you to look at Jesus and know, like Melchizedek, he never comes to an end. There's never a time or a place you can't reach him and he can't help you. This Melchizedek stuff is tough, but it's tough and it's powerful because it points us to the power of Jesus in our lives. So here's your encouragement tonight. Don't give up on weird, hard Old Testament ideas. They're worth digging into because you'll find stuff that matters very much today. That's the first easy one. The second one is, look for the moment in your life that you are most tempted to ignore Jesus and lean in hard. Friends, I've got a hard week the rest of this week. Some weeks in ministry are easy, some weeks are hard, some weeks are fun, some weeks are not. Craig can tell you all about those. But I have to preach a funeral for a 26-hour-old baby on Saturday. And those are the worst days in ministry. But do you know what I'm going to stand in front of that family and say? Lean into Jesus, because he's the only way you make it. He is with you, and he will never fail you. So tonight, this is your invitation. If you have been tempted to give up on Jesus, if you have been tempted to put more stock in someone or something than you put in Jesus, this is your call. Come to him. Let's stand and sing.
Shall we pray? Our dearest gracious Father in heaven, thank you so very much for this another beautiful day. Thank you for this opportunity we've had to pause at midweek and to recharge and listen to this powerful message on the powerful priesthood of our Lord. We ask that you will continue to be with this church, be with those that were mentioned as sick, be with us as we travel home. In Jesus' name, amen.